Hello and welcome to today's podcast. So first of all, thank you for tuning in. Whether you're watching, whether you're listening, thank you. I appreciate all of you. So let's get stuck into today's topic. And today's topic is a lot of people are starting kind of fitness because it's January, okay? But realistically, this is the perfect time to start if you do want to get the dream physique or really make dents and progress in your physique development ready for summer or whatever the long-term goal is. And the point of this podcast video is to talk about developing that fat loss routine, okay? And I can speak from experience in the fact that during prep, routine was everything. And of course, prep is an extreme. Prep is something that most people, 99% of people, will not do or will ever even want to do. And that's absolutely fine. But at the extremities, you can really see how things benefit phases. And what I found during a prep, and where it really did get tough at times, and anyone who competes will know this, is that the routine is everything. And creating that successful routine really does set you up for a brilliant fat loss phase. And speak to anyone who's been on stage, they get kind of inside out lean. And that is because of the routine that they have. And I've kind of reverse engineered it, and I've had to think, like, what are the pillars to this fat loss routine that will really help you guys with your fat loss come summer, or if you're in a fat loss phase now? And I've pinpointed it to a few points, okay? And of course, sorry, there probably are more. But nonetheless, like, let's get stuck into it and really delve into each topic. So the first point is, regardless of kind of where you are, if you're advanced, intermediate, or a complete newbie, you need to just meet yourself where you currently are. And this is something that we need to do to be able to bridge that initial friction and bridge that original demand from the changes that you'll need to make. So most of us will be coming from a somewhat trained standpoint. So what you don't want to do is just change everything straight away. Asking too much of yourself early on will normally mean that your adherence will drop off, because you'll find like it's too much, okay? And what you need to do within that is build that routine and meet yourself where you're currently at in terms of your free time. How many times can you train? How much time do you have to put aside for nutrition? How optimally can you recover? Because you need to know where you sit in terms of your fat loss goal. If it is a prep, you need to be on top of all of these things, and arguably where your starting point is should be in a very good place. If it's just kind of a holiday kind of beach lean diet, there's probably a few things that you'll need to manipulate so that you meet yourself where you're currently at. Chances are, if you're not a competitor and you don't want to jump on stage, then it is just going to be a more casual diet, and you will have more kind of friction points that we'll talk about later on in the video and the podcast that you'll need to get over. So the first point is meet yourself where you're at. Don't change everything straight away. Work around what you can work with. No point setting yourself 7 days of cardio when you can only do 3 days because you have work commitments or you have a family. So meet yourself where you're at. I recommend jotting down key information about how many times you can train, nutrition, where you're at currently with your calories, so on and so forth. So that you're not just kind of aimlessly shooting in the dark when you start. A second point is to build in non-negotiables to your day. Arguably, I think you should have non-negotiables throughout your life, whatever phase you're in. But in terms of fat loss, there is non-negotiables that we literally need to prioritize if you want to make this fat loss a success. And again, there's levels to this, okay? If you want to get on stage, these non-negotiables need to be hit within a T. If it's just a holiday lean, you just need to have them at the forefront of your mind and make sure that you are nailing them more than you are not. So I would put these non-negotiables down as your nutritional intake, so your calorie intake. Of course, we know that for fat loss, calorie deficit is key. I'm not going to bore you with that boring saying. Next up is your activity. So I separate this between cardio and your normal steps, okay? I track those as separate metrics, and I probably would have them as your non-negotiables, because they will be something that will kind of make your calorie output more consistent. and therefore you can get more accurate with your results. So we've got your calorie intake is one non-negotiable, your activity, so that's cardio and steps, is another non-negotiable. I would say your training has to be a non-negotiable, especially in a fat loss phase. We don't want to be losing the hard-earned muscle that we spent ages trying to grow. It is quite hard to grow muscle, like you do have to do some very stupid shit, but nonetheless, it can be done. So make sure your training is a non-negotiable, especially if you're kind of a quote unquote gen population client, because sometimes we let ourselves slip with training. Personally, I don't, because I'm very disciplined with that, and competitors have a different mindset around this, but if you're kind of a general gym goer, you might find yourself kind of thinking, right, today I'm tired today. But if you set the standard and you set the bar and say, right, this is a non-negotiable, I'm not going to not do this, it will just snowball into consistency and success. So build those non-negotiables into your day. The third one is to set high standards for yourself, and regardless of who you are, this is something that you should be carrying throughout your fitness journey, okay? And of course, standards will differ from person to person. So your high standards might be different to mine. Jack's might be different to Jill's. Don't know why I use that analogy or names. But nonetheless, those high standards should be kept throughout. And these will drip feed into your non-negotiables, for example. So I always think, like, for a lot of clients, I will ask them, what is success like for you, and how can we make sure you do that? What values align with you? And from that, we can work out what those high standards are. If you're a prep client, high standards would be probably beating the package that you brought to the stage last time. And then all of your actions that precede that must be at that same high standard to push your performance further. And that's the same with everyone else. Like, we need to have these high standards so that we can develop our physique, keep the standard of everything high or relatively high relative to what we perceive high as, so that our performance is good, our recovery is good. And then again, we're building that environment, we're building that routine that will facilitate fat loss in the long run. And this also comes into like decision making, okay? If you have high standards for yourself, you're less likely to let yourself off the hook. You're less likely to let that motivation and that motive driver drop off if you feel tired, because you'll be like, right, no, I've got high standards of myself. I said to myself I was going to do it. And at the end of the day, you are the main source of accountability in your life. Like, you can outsource it, like I'm going to talk about in a second, but you hold the key to the success of a fat loss phase. Not your coach, not your calorie intake, not anything else, not your training program, you do. And if you don't take control and set high standards of your actions around that, your fat loss phase is destined to fail. So set high expectations of everything, every kind of sector in this fat loss phase. The next one, and interestingly I did speak about that, is know your sweet spots across the day. And this is quite a good one for when diets get hard and for when they're super easy, because lots of us will have different points in the day where we are more productive. Some people are night owls, some people are good in the morning. Do a lot of your hard work relating to the fat loss around that time. So if you're a morning person, get up, do your steps, get up, do some cardio, get up and do your training if you need to, if you have to, and if you're doing training and cardio on the same day. But evolve your day around when you feel good. There's nothing worse than potentially being like a morning person, having a busy day at work, and then having to drag your ass to the gym. Yes, of course we set high expectations for ourselves, so we will still get to the gym, but the difference in your performance and your perception of that experience will be very different if you align it with the good points that you have across the day. And this is something that I found, like, when I was on prep, like, I'm definitely a morning person. Whether I like it or not, I was getting up quite early. I was going to the gym doing my cardio. Yes, I was doing excessive amounts of cardio because that's what I needed to do. But nonetheless, I was doing my cardio and I was doing about 8,000 steps all before 9:30. This then meant that I'd done half of my steps for the day. I'd done 90% of my cardio for the day. And then all I had to do is go back and do my training and all of the work in the rest of the day. So I knew my sweet spot. And I capitalized on it, okay? If I left that all to the end of the day, like some days it did happen because of work, because of emergencies, it's tougher. There is a lot more friction then, and friction is the reason fat loss periods fail. The next one is to be accountable to something. And I know I spoke about that the main source of accountability is you, but sometimes a lot of us need that external accountability, whether that's social media, whether that's family, whether that's a spouse, partner, friend, whatever. Outsourcing that accountability can be super helpful, okay? One of the best forms is a coach. A coach will hold you accountable and guide you within that process. But if you are using like a friend, family, peer group, make sure they're on the same wavelength. Because what you'll find is, I found this, well, I don't find this, but some people find this, that it can be very supportive, okay? Because if people know you're on a fat loss phase and they see you kind of looking at chocolate, or they normally buy chocolate in the house, they might start making decisions like, right, I know Alex is on a diet, I'm not going to get this in the house because this will be tougher for him. And this really does help the phase, because again, it's reducing friction. And if you can involve more people in what you're trying to achieve, you won't feel so alone in the process. You'll almost have like a mini community or ecosystem that will help you nail this phase. And accountability is a big one, okay? Because who's going to call you out if you don't do something? Who's going to call you out if you don't do a non-negotiable? One thing I will say is, what I'm finding a lot at the moment is, I'm coaching a lot of partners. Like, I'm coaching the boyfriend and the girlfriend. And the reason for this is, you don't necessarily want your spouse telling you that you shouldn't be eating that cake. It's a kind of it crosses a border. It crosses a barrier in the relationship. I don't think you should really be telling people not to eat and stuff like that. So getting a coach is one of the easiest ways to do that. It's an impartial kind of head that will make objective decisions and guide you through the process. So outsource your accountability, as well as holding high expectations for yourself. The last one is kind of encapsulates all of the previous points, is to just reduce friction in the diet. And I think at the start of a dieting phase, you should, based on your previous diet experience, identify friction points. And by friction points, I mean, what's made you drop off in the past? What's made it really difficult in the past? For lots of people, it's just miseducation around food. For lots of people, it's social occasions. For people trying to do a bodybuilding show, a lot of the time, there isn't that much friction, because we know and we're prepared to make the sacrifices that are necessary to get into that level of condition. So friction isn't necessarily an issue. It's more kind of time, usually, about getting as lean as you need to for a show. But for general population clients, you'd be thinking about, right, it's social occasions. What happens on a social occasion? I go out, I have a few beers, and then I overeat. And then the next day I'm making poor decisions around food. Okay, let's try and firstly reduce the amount of times you're drinking or going to these social occasions, or let's provide a plan, a framework that you can manage it better. First of all, probably binge drinking isn't the best way to get around it, and it's never going to kind of elicit that good of results. But nonetheless, once you identify friction points, you can work at overcoming those friction points. Because if you start a dieting phase with tons and tons of friction points, you will always run into more problems than you would like. And what we're then doing is, if we encounter a lot of friction, we are then using up a lot of our bandwidth to overcome those friction points, as opposed to actually focusing on the things that are going to bring about the fat loss success, those non-negotiables. And what happens, you'll burn out very quickly. If you spend all of your energy trying to overcome not having a biscuit out the biscuit tin, very soon, day 3, day 4, all of that energy is gone. All of your decision-making fatigue is kind of used up, and then you're going to be really struggling. And we can't rely on willpower forever. So that's why we need to develop that environment, reduce friction points across the dieting phase. So that's a little short, sharp podcast this week. I hope you've enjoyed it, because I know a lot of people are coming to Project Sparks looking for their kind of fat loss phases and their fat loss system for summer in mind, because realistically, this is the first proper summer we're probably going to have, fingers crossed, all outside of the C word. Not cunt, the different one. But other than that, thank you for listening. If you're new around here, don't forget to follow and subscribe. Review the podcast if you are on Spotify, that would help, and on Apple Podcasts. And lastly, if you do need support with your fat loss or muscle gain, we are taking on clients at the moment, and we find that podcast listeners are the most valuable clients, because they are prepared to sit and listen to the education and the information that's going to bring about success. So once again, Nice, short, sharp podcast. I hope you're enjoying these shorter ones. And I will get Rowan back on soon. He's just very busy with exams. But other than that, I hope you have a great day, whatever you are doing, wherever you are in the world, and keep pushing forwards to your physique goals. Other than that, I'll speak to you soon.